Anton is the founder of Sexy Spirits, which offers education in both solo and dual sexual energy cultivation practices.
There we go.
He is also the co-founder of the Traditional Chinese Healing Arts School. And Dominic is a wandering Taoist who has taught yoga, massage, Qigong, and meditation for over 20 years. He is a certified instructor in the Universal Healing Tao system. Welcome, Anton and Dominic. It's so wonderful to see you both here at the Qigong Global Summit.
Thank you, Sharon. It's great to see you too.
So we'll start with you, Dominic. Can you talk about the difference between sex and sexual energy?
Yes. Sex is the action-based thing we engage in that can be very focused on procreation, but is often focused on pleasure, getting some kind of satisfaction. And sexual energy is an energy that moves through our body all the time. It's constantly, I think of it down to like each time our cells divide, we're giving birth to ourselves constantly. So the sexual energy is flowing through us all the time. When we are a smile at a sunset or a friend, there's that, it's the same energy of like love and pleasure that's emanating all the time. And being able to appreciate that and choose what to do with it is what we're working with right now.
Thank you. Anton, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. First of all, I'm assuming when you say the word sex, you're referring to the intimate act and engagement between two people or more, who knows. When I think of sexual energy, I believe that we're talking about the entire system within the body, which is involved with sexual energy production, i.e. the menstrual cycles for the women, all the actions that go into making sure that the reproductive system and the brain is connected for the hormonal release of chemicals in our body when we engage in the sex act. So when we talk about sexual energy, I would say that sex is a subset of sexual energy. And when we talk about sexual energy, we're really talking about the entire system that makes up the reproductive system toward the act of, the final act, or the nature of the act of our goal of procreation. It's not necessarily the sexual energy that we are cultivating, though, when it comes to the Taoist practices.
So Anton, thank you for that. I know from your years of teaching that you have gone deeply into sexual energy cultivation and its implication for men's health in all dimensions, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So can you tell me a little bit what you mean when you talk about sexual energy cultivation and why it's important, and how do men practice?
Okay, so sexual energy cultivation is, first of all, when it refers to health, we are looking at the health of the prostate, the volume and quality of the semen, and then the proper blood circulation for the penis to be able to achieve 4 stages of enhancements, as we call it. When we talk about sexual energy cultivation, we realize that everything in the body that is sexual energy engages eventually in its final goal toward procreation. One step before that act of procreation, which is normally for the man, the release of semen and the ejaculation for the purpose of uniting with an egg, one step or one stage before that is the orgasm. That orgasm, I would say, would be the final stage right before we enter into a process of procreating to ejaculation. And when we talk about cultivating sexual energy, that's the energy that we're cultivating. We're bringing the body to that state of orgasm. And normally what happens in the process is the being, if you will, dissolves into the orgasm. They dissolve into the physicality of that expression. And that's why before the orgasm, we see everything in Panasonic color, and then after it, everything is black and white again. The goal of sexual energy cultivation is for the training and the practice of getting the orgasmic response to dissolve within the being so that that energy is retained and that the awareness that is expanded by that energy dissolving into the being is able to be processed and used in an entirely different way. So the quick answer would be that in normal orgasm, the being dissolves into the orgasm. When we cultivate, we practice getting the orgasm to dissolve into us as a spirit, if you will, or as an infinite being.
Thank you for that. And Dominic, I'm sure you have some wisdom to impart about this. Can you tell us what you mean by sexual energy cultivation, its importance, and how to practice?
Oh, thank you for that thorough, detailed description, Anton. I would say that just to put it in a different dimension, that the feelings we have as we interact with life can just be appreciated in that way, as I was saying earlier. And if we can be aware of our intentions when we're mining for intimacy or mining for pleasure, or maybe even acting compulsively, which happens a lot for generally people, we can make better choices about what we're doing with that. And the way that I tend to pitch it when I'm teaching friends is you can take that same beautiful energy that we use to generate pleasure and use it for healing, for wisdom, for more compassion, to take this natural energy flow that, as Anton pointed out, the body's constantly trying to produce procreation, constantly pushing energy into that way, and we can appreciate that and direct it into other parts of our life, for creativity, for deepening our relationships with other people, or intimacy with ourselves, and ultimately enrich our whole entire quality of life by making love with ourselves, not just when we're practicing, but of course all throughout our life.
Thanks. So, both of you are touching upon this kind of spiritual orientation to sexual energy and sexual experience. And, it's very clear that many people have a longing to transcend their mundane life through sex. And I love what you said, Anton, about, in orgasm, everything's in technicolor, then it goes back to black and white. And it's this kind of longing that people have for this. And in fact, many of us had our first experience of spirituality not through a traditional religious experience, but through the feeling of union that we experience through sex. So, Dominic, can you talk about connecting our sexual nature to what some people call God or goddess? And how does that happen? And what does Qigong or energy cultivation have to do with it?
Well, let's say in a state of not knowing, the first way it happens is we all experience orgasm differently, but when orgasm undulates through our being, it opens us up. And again, this is just putting things in words, is always a little tricky, opens us up to more dimensions than we're usually experiencing. So for a lot of people, even though their orgasmic bliss might only last 15 seconds, they get a sense of eternity. They get like a feeling of oneness that doesn't even enter into the conscious mind, but it's just a visceral body, emotional, psychic experience. And one of the things that a lot of people practice when they're talking about spirituality and the yearning to practice being in oneness, being in unity consciousness or Christ consciousness, they always think about it as something other than what's happening right now, something they need to attain, when in fact it is our natural reality. Like one of the phrases I use all the time to translate a Taoist concept I have into a Judeo-Christian dominant paradigm view is, we are all cells in the body of God. We cannot exist without the entire universe. Therefore, we can just really take one step out of our identity to say, I am everything, because I can't exist without the universe. Certainly when we make love, when we're in love with someone, we can feel the echo of all the times anyone's ever been in love with anyone, a sky, a squirrel with a acorn. And I guess the poetry, like being able to have the physical, mental, emotional experience that takes us beyond concepts, is part of the reasons we like sex. I mean, a lot of people's sexual experience is very verbal, and that's true, but the orgasmic experience is something beyond words, beyond common concepts. And again, I always think all religions are trying to celebrate the experience of the unsayable and the unknowable together. Everybody has had this resonance inside of themselves, but then when they go to talk to someone else about it, they're like, blah, 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 blah. It's really hard to adequately express the infinite. And religion attempts to do that, gets us all together so we can all like sing our maker's praises, and it gets muddled in the process. But sex is also an experience that allows us to just really know that with someone that we love, gaze upon them and see the face of God, and feel ourselves as the lover of God and God. And that's one of the arguments why a lot of religions villainize sexuality, is that you're not dependent on some vicar or bishop if you get the connection to God with your lover or with yourself, because that's a very adequate sexual experience. And we've talked about this before, that a lot of people who practice Taoist sex practices, they long for dual cultivation. That is to say, a partner that wants to come at sex with the same kind of reverence and curiosity and playfulness and mastery, yearning for mastery. But mostly you get somebody who wants a cookie, and the cookies are good, but the type of enriching of our sexual exploration tends to happen by ourselves, and that's okay. We can still get to that the knowledge and the visceral experience of oneness by ourselves. It's a very wonderful experience.
And so, for those of you who might be new to this kind of conversation, what Dominic is talking about is what the Taoists call solo cultivation. And solo cultivation is a major part of learning about your sexual energy, about what it does, all of those things. So, Anton, do you have anything to add to this understanding of the spirituality of
Yes.
sex? Yeah.
Yes, and to follow up what you just said, solo cultivation is an unusual practice. I'm not sure it ever happened before we had Taoist monks that realized that sexual energy was an important part of their not only health, but spiritual advancement, and in the process of staying celibate at the same time. To add, I'd like to refer to something you said before that, and to something you and Dominic said early on in the first question, and that is that when we have that first moment, or when we have not just that first moment, that experience of intimacy with someone, where we experience orgasm, and when that orgasm, incidentally, not all the time, but when it is amplified with true love, we have probably the closest experience that Dominic was expressing of perfection, of, we almost, I don't know, we can always relate to that time that we fell in love, and that we fell in this kind of spell. And quite often we begin to negate that feeling. But if we really think about what that feeling is, it's when we saw absolute perfection. We actually were ready to disengage from what we thought was the reality or the real world, and realize, oh my God, this is everything we're living for. So I believe that is what the state of orgasm, especially when it's magnified with love, connects us to. It connects us to the perfection. some type of perfection that unites our physical form as a male or female and unites it with this infinite being within. And there's where I'd like to go back to what Dominic first said. The sexual energy, what do we mean by that? It starts with our mother and father. And our mother and father are not somebody beyond us. My mother and father are past now, but they're still alive. Why? Because they're right here. This hand, this body came from my mother and father. Therefore, this body is taking all the information and all the love that has been passed down through all the ancestors into this body. It's like a download. And in order to connect with what I call the infinite being through God, we need to go back through that doorway, because our parents served that force, that primordial force that created all of this life. And if we have in any way any resistance to doing that, the door is closed. And we are now stuck with handling issues that keep cropping up, with having relationships that keep coming up and showing up as our mother and father that we had judgments toward. And until we can truly feel our mother and father right here in our body, and then feel them, how they are the doorway to how they served life in bringing us to this world, we then have an immediate connection. That is what I feel. That's kind of how I go to sleep every night. I feel that connection, and I feel that connection to the allness. And I would say that is the closest thing that I've ever experienced to connecting with God on a daily basis.
Thank you for that. I think that one of the things that becomes, or when you think about it, becomes very clear to human beings is that we resonate with sexual energy because we came out of that. You know, everybody was born from sex. Everybody. Even the ones who hate sex, they came out of sex. So that frequency of union is kind of built into our energetic structure. And so this kind of leads me to the next question, because here we are at the Qigong Global Summit, and some people out there might be interested in hearing both of you talk about what cultivating sexual energy has to do with your life force, ultimately, in terms of your health, your emotional stability, your just general feeling of being aliveness, in your own aliveness and vitality. So Anton, can you address that first, and then Dominic, you can chime in.
Sure. So we all know people who are born with less than better immune systems, and people that are born with super immune systems. In other words, we're all born with the particular weaknesses and strengths that we inherited for whatever reason. And in order to make up for those imbalances, we need external forces. We need external good foods. We need external environments, external good air, external relationships, in order to strengthen those weaknesses and bring us back into balance. The wonderful thing about, and what that does in the process is allows us to transform that energy, say of the plants that have taken that energy from the sun and from the earth. We get to transform that energy into better health and better well-being. Now, why do I talk about that relation to sexual energy? Because sexual energy has this unique quality, this internal factory, if you will, where it magnifies itself. It's this internal energy that we can, once we tap it into it, it magnifies it. It keeps expanding. And that energy can be transformed into the imbalances that we might have in our body. That energy can be transformed into better well-being, just like food, just like good air. So I would say the lack of tapping into sexual energy is probably the biggest loss to most human beings, because they're missing out on probably the most greatest internal force that nature gave us. in order to repair ourselves. We have an energy that's capable of creating a brand new life, a brand new body. And to be able to take that energy and internalize it and do our own healing, creating our own body, and in Taoist circles, creating their own spiritual body that at the time of death could easily leave and leave a body in a perfect state of health when it chose to leave its body. Now, whether that's myth or reality, I love the story. And every time I practice that story, I have a lot of fun, and I just gain so much insights and wisdom about life.
Thank you for that. Dominic?
I'll to resonate with what he just said. When I was a little kid and they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to be a wizard, right? And when I discovered sex, I was like, okay, this is the most amazing magic that every single person has available to them at every moment. You can make another person with it. What else can you do with it? And as I experienced and talked with people and learned things from other lineages, it literally infuses everything you do. Like I said, the dividing of your cells, the growing of your hair, making dinner for your friends or yourself, or crocheting or writing, whatever you do, it is your sexual energy, right? And like so many energies, emotional energies that through Taoist practices we learn to pay attention to and make wiser choices about when you are aware how fundamental your sexual drive is. And again, so many men are habituated to spilling their sexual energy out all the time. I mean, I know people who are like, oh, 3 times a day, it just, it can be very draining. And especially if it's done unconsciously or what energies are being focused on while that experience is being had. I've noticed throughout my life many times that I am happiest when I have a good balance of good food, good exercise, and good sexual energy. And I've noticed a lot in the last year of this isolation, where a lot of people have been alone, that lacking good exercise and good sexual energy, they're eating a lot because it's one of the only sensual pleasures they can have. And we're in bodies, so we can have sensual pleasures. But if we can figure out ways, again, like it doesn't have to be the peak experience of orgasm. One of the things we learn when we're doing soul cultivation is how you can have these tiny little orgasms all the time. Like in doing entirely other things, you can feel sexual energy ripple out through your cells or through organs, and appreciating that as orgasmic bliss, and then multiplying it, letting it generate and spread through the whole being. It's just one of the most nourishing things we can give to ourselves and our friends. Again, when we are doing dual cultivation or even playing, as it were, with someone else, we can give this beautiful energy if we are conscious enough and habituated or trained to be able to make those choices when the passion is there. And it can just on such a fundamental level transform the rest of all the actions we make. And that can affect everyone else we meet.
So I just thought of another question, so I'm gonna go for it. In the Taoist literature, there's a big emphasis on separating orgasm from ejaculation and retrieving the energy that the body uses for reproduction, retrieving that energy so that you can circulate it. And for women, we're sort of built like that, like the orgasm, because of the way our bodies are, the energy goes up. But for men, it's counter to the way the body is built, because in orgasm, the energy goes out. So I'm wondering if, Dominic, it's your turn to take the question first. If you can talk a little bit about that, separating ejaculation from orgasm and what your experience is.
Well, first, there's a certain amount of making precious without being too clingy. Again, you don't want to be in a state of lack. which one of the dangers when I teach people Taoist stuff and I tell them, well, you only have so many ejaculations in your life. A lot of people they can't get on board with that. But to be able to understand that, again, if you're ejaculating 3 times a day, that trying to enforce upon them like how many nutrients, vitamins, and minerals and sugars, and just the amount of energy the body is required to replace that kind of output. And then getting people to romanticize or mythologize what the orgasm is and can do, and appreciate the subtlest versions of it. Because again, the more we can appreciate like a soft caress, the less we're seeking like, you know, a hammer hard experience. We get to get into the flow and the softness of things, and in that we can start to feel like one of the metaphor that's often used is the scale of 1 to 10. Like if you get to 10, you're ejaculating, and even 8 or 9, you're just too close to be able to make good choices. So like when I teach people, I'm just like, hang out in 5 and 6, like really appreciate 3. And again, like if you can appreciate 1 and 2 when you're in the middle of doing something else and you're just like, oh, I just had a nice feeling. You know, it's one of the things that I love taking classes with Montauk Chia, when he'll just be doing something and he'll just be like, I just had a little orgasm, you know, and it's like to be able to make it that normal is super powerful, so that it doesn't have to be something that happens in a separate place. It can happen in every moment.
Anton?
Yes. Regarding ejaculation, it would seem that nature made us very dispensable and disposable once we've ejaculated. Even in the animal kingdom, I know there's, I think it's the praying mantis that eats its male after it's copulated. Also, I would say that nature did one other little trick on us, and that is that many men, I'm sure, can remember as little boys having experienced orgasm by touching themselves way before they were mature enough to be able to ejaculate. And when that moment happened, I remember mine distinctly because I was a Catholic then. I thought, oh my God, I broke something. And I said, I'll never, I prayed to God that, I'll never do it again. I'll never touch myself, just fix it. Well, God answered me and he fixed it within 24 hours and I was back again. And then after that, I began to suspect that God had nothing to do with it. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we do experience that ejaculation with orgasm, we have this fusion that takes place now. And this fusion, nature says, you can have as much orgasm as you like, and now we've given you ejaculation to accompany it. And we begin to serve nature's directive of procreating through an orgasm. And I think what we do in self-cultivation as a man, we learn to unfuse and separate those two responses that were always there with us as little boys. And once we experience that, we actually can take with our wisdom and with our training, we can take the area of orgasm even further. So that's why I never teach non-ejaculatory orgasm. I always teach what I call seminal expansion, being able to expand the seminal energy and power that begins to magnify in your body as you reach orgasm and high arousal, and how to be able to take that energy and bring it into your bones, bring it into your organs, bringing it into your brain, and expand it. In other words, you give it more volume for it to exist within your body, as opposed to keeping it within a tiny area of the genitals where it seeks the path of least resistance in order to procreate, which is kind of what its job is.
Thank you for that. So now it's time that you guys can both teach a practice. And Dominic, would you like to begin?
Sure, Sharon. I'm going to teach something called, it's a microcosmic orbit, lunar orbit, kidney breathing. So just start with closing your eyes, go internal, feel your breath, bring to mind anyone or anything that inspires the feeling of happiness, and bring a little smile to your face and heart and let that happiness radiate through the body. Feel your head with the intention of letting the head float up towards the sky, and noticing any tension, just let it dissipate out into space. Then bring the attention down to the soles of the feet, to the buttocks, and feel yourself rooting into the ground. And that type of groundedness just spread up through the body, letting anything that's flittering around settle down and come to rest. Feel your pelvic floor and do a few pelvic contractions, PC pull-ups, just condensing the pelvic floor just to practice that sensation. Give yourself a few deep breaths.
Help me light the stove. I don't know how to do it. I saw him do it last night, but
So with this groundwork set up, we're going to inhale, pulling in light from whichever direction you want, up above, and down below, from the navel. We're going to condense energy in the navel. The inhale, and on the exhale, we're going to push it down into the pelvic floor, into the genitals. So just this first few times, you can be very exploratory. You don't have to worry about staying with your breath. When you learn the practice, it's much easier to do this all in one breath. But as you inhale, fill up the navel. As you exhale, you clench the pelvic floor and push the energy, the light, down into the genitals, exploring all of the parts that you're aware of, testicles, prostate, penis, and then bring it back to the tailbone, sacrum, up the spine and into the kidneys to let it spiral around. That's all on the exhale. When you inhale, you pull in more light from above, from below, from in front of you, and then from the kidneys, making a continuity, filling up the navel with light. And then you exhale, clench the pelvic floor and press down, filling the genitals with light, pulling it back and up the spine, into the kidneys, spiraling around, releasing the pelvic floor. Inhaling back into the navel, pulling energy from all directions, filling the navel with light, exhaling down into the genitals. Clenching the pelvic floor, filling the genitals with light, back to the sacrum, up the spine, to the kidneys. So it's this very simple little path. It's nice to do in series of 3s, 9s, as many times as you like. Very good to do in the morning because it can energize you. You don't really want to be doing it in the evening, but it's a wonderful way of connecting. As you do this, as you practice it, you can feel the strengthening of the pelvic clenching, of strengthening the genitals and strengthening that whole pelvic girdle, and you're nourishing the genitals, but also spreading it into the kidneys, which helps, of course, nourish the rest of the Qigong and the whole body. And then, of course, when you're done, you just bring it back to the navel and dissolve it into the dantian, let it spiral, and sit in silence for a little bit.
Thank you. I don't have the same plumbing, but I enjoyed that.
Yeah. So did I.
So Anton, can you share something with us?
In this movement, I'll be showing you 5 stages of movement that connect the waters deep within the earth to our kidneys, the prostate gland to our pineal gland, and finally, the connection of the heaven and the earth. We begin by first talking about the posture. We start with the weight on the balls of the feet. The back is long, the rib cage is dropped, the head is held forward and out. We have our weight poised on the balls of the feet on the bubbling spring. We begin by extending the arms forward and out, and we sink deep into the earth, bringing the water energies into the kidneys. We use the sacral pump and the cranial pump to draw the energy upward to the brain. At the same time, we squeeze the prostate, tongue on the roof of the mouth, and we let the eyes roll toward the pineal gland. While we hold in that position, we prepare the hands to separate, one going up and one going down, and we sink further into the horse stance, pressing upward and downward at the same time, connecting the heaven and the earth. We then repeat the movement on the other side. We again sink into the earth, bringing the water energies to the kidneys, squeezing the prostate, rolling the eyes to the pineal gland, tongue on the roof of the mouth. This time, we switch the hands, pressing the opposite hand up and down as we sink into the horse stance. We can see this in 5 movements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We inhale, we exhale. We inhale, we exhale. We inhale, we exhale. We inhale, we exhale. Open, and we finish.
What a wonderful session, an interesting conversation with 2 seriously cool male practitioners of Taoist sexual practice. So, Dominic, how can people reach you? And do you have any classes or online events coming up anytime soon?
Thank you, Sharon. I don't have any classes scheduled right now, but I do have a website, dominicvine.com/Qigong. You can read about my practices and personal coaching and any other classes I'll be teaching. I'll post there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anton, what about you?
Yes, there is a bonus that I've included. You can contact me as well as see the website. The best website to go right now is Mastering Sexual Energy. There will be a course that I'll be offering with my colleague in the traditional Chinese healing arts. He's with herbology and nutrition. I bring in the sexual cultivation practices. It is for, the name of the class is Sex, Vitality, and Health for men over 50. So.
So thank you both for such an interesting conversation and for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with our